Thank you very much. Folks, my name is Robert Robinson, and I'm formerly homeless, and I'm a member of an organization called Picture the Homeless. Picture the Homeless was founded on the principle that homeless people have civil and human rights regardless of race, creed, color, or economic status. Picture the Homeless was founded and is led by homeless people. We refuse to accept being neglected. We demand that our voices and experiences are heard at all levels of decision-making that impact us. We oppose the quality of life laws that criminalize homeless people in any form by the city, state, and national governments. We change these laws and policies as well. We work to change these laws and policies as well as to challenge the root causes of homelessness. Our strategies include grassroots organizing, direct action, educating homeless people about their rights, public education, challenging media stereotypes, and building relationships with allies. A little bit of background on the organization. Picture the Homeless was founded in 1999 by two homeless individuals, Anthony Williams and Louis Haggins. Fed up with the way the homeless persons were being treated by the Giuliani administration and seeing the constant dehumanization and oppression of homeless by the administration and mainstream media, they set out to be our voice for homeless New Yorkers and to protect the civil and human rights of all homeless individuals and families. At the same time, homeless people were being criminalized. Landlords were allowed to keep buildings empty. Sort of a conflict there. Our vacant property campaign was born basically out of those situations where we saw people sleeping on the street and we saw people being criminalized for sleeping on the street in front of empty buildings. The vacant property campaign was born out of the Giuliani's administration's crackdown on the quality of life crimes, many of which were aimed directly at the homeless. Under Giuliani's administration, increased criminalization, sleeping on sidewalks in front of vacant buildings or on park benches, in lots obviously abandoned by their owners, became more and more of a problem. More and more homeless people were being forced into shelters with no hope of a permanent place to live. The administration seemed comfortable with a quasi-homeless industry, warehousing people in shelters and no hope of getting permanent housing. New York City's Department of Homeless Services was given over $500 million and partnered with nonprofit care providers to create this homeless industry. With no oversight, this industry continued to grow in New York City, and large numbers of homeless people into shelters with no hope of permanent housing. You might ask why we wanted to do a building count. Well, this organization moved from Judson Memorial Park, where they were located originally on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, or Lower West Side, excuse me, in November of 2003. They moved to East 116th Street between 3rd and Lexington Avenue. Almost as soon as the organization arrived, they started to notice a large number of empty buildings in the area. Questions started to arise amongst the members of the organization as, why are these buildings sitting empty when there are so many homeless people that need a place to stay? Why is it a crime for me to sleep on a sidewalk in front of a building when these buildings are sitting empty? Why not take this property and create housing for homeless people? You know, while Picture the Homeless believed there were significant numbers of vacant properties and empty buildings around the city, the belief was a lot stronger in East Harlem, where the office was located. Efforts to convince the Bloomberg administration fell on deaf ears. We get responses like, there's only a 3% vacancy rate, or the numbers aren't really significant, you know, or the administration's working on the issue. You know, it just didn't seem to be important to the Bloomberg administration. It became apparent to our members that we must take action, and the count was born. This is what Lynn meant by direct action. You sit, you try to work with agencies or elected officials, appointed officials, and when you get no response, then you move and you take a direct action. Even though the Picture the Homeless was unsuccessful in convincing the Bloomberg administration that a count was necessary, we were successful in gaining Manhattan Borough's President Scott Stringer as a partner. He believed in what we brought to him, what we presented to him, and he decided to partner with us. On 2 Saturdays in 2006, one in the summer and one in the fall, volunteers from Picture the Homeless, along with the entire staff of the Manhattan Borough President's Office, developed a methodology, and the count was done. In May 2007, Picture the Homeless released its homeless people count vacant properties in Manhattan. The Manhattan Borough President also released a separate report. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of his report. The Manhattan Borough President released his report. While both reports detailed vacant and abandoned property, Picture the Homeless took a more drastic approach on how to correct the problem. With not receiving any state, federal funding or any funding from the government, we could be a little more vocal and a little more radical about the way we go about saying to correct this problem. We didn't have to stand by and wait for other individuals to decide how to correct it for us. Some of the findings from our report: the total number of vacant buildings, 1,723. Remember, we counted only the borough of Manhattan alone. We didn't do a citywide count. This was conducted only in the borough of Manhattan. The total number of empty buildings and total number of empty units in the vacant buildings, 11,170. Total number of vacant lots, 505. Total number of potential apartments in the vacant buildings, 24,000. It's enough apartments to house the entire homeless population of New York City. What's the administration waiting for? Let's get busy. When you start to think of ideas on how to create affordable housing, I think there are two things you have to do. First, you have to develop a funding stream. But I think what's important in this city is to redefine the word affordable. Right now, New York City is using a calculation to define affordable that just doesn't work. Area median income, the way it's calculated in New York City right now, is just not going to work for most of the neighborhoods in New York City. When you start to include Putnam County in a mix of the 5 boroughs, it makes absolutely no sense at all. It's giving you an inflated number that doesn't realistically reflect the population of New York City. There are poorer neighborhoods in this city that don't reflect a median income of $70,000, and that's what the federal government says exists here in the 5 boroughs. That is a bogus number, and it's time for it to change. Whenever you think of creating new and affordable housing, you must secure funding. To us, it was a common sense solution, but we knew people would call it idealistic and unrealistic, which is why we had to come up with a detailed plan for concrete funding strategies. Picture the Homeless consulted with organizations like Urban Homestead Assistance Board, UHAB, and the Cooper Square Mutual Housing Association. These groups work with our organization to help us understand how to build and maintain affordable housing. For example, Cooper Square explained how to construct a building which contains mixed income tenants, providing space for commercial tenants, and even things like renting out the roof to cellular service providers to create additional income within that unit. That helps offset a lot of the cost. Currently, New York City's Department of Homeless Services has a budget of $700 million. Along with that, some $60 to $80 million is funded through the shelter system in McKinney-Vento funding. That's $750 million that doesn't look to construct any new affordable housing in the city. It's time for a change. It's time for some of that money to be redirected. You can't just shut down your shelter system, but you can certainly make changes within that organization and start to redirect some of that funding to build affordable housing. It's time to stop putting people in warehousing them in shelters and start to build a permanent housing. Give these people a place to stay. Okay? Along with building affordable housing, you would eliminate the need for shelters in neighborhoods where they are unwelcome. Housing builds communities in ways shelters do not. For every dollar spent on housing, it is estimated that $10 to $27 is generated in that community in revenue. So, folks, take that $700 million. Let's start redirecting it. It's going to bring you 27 times that money back into that neighborhood. It's time for a change. It's also important to remember that creating new housing only solves part of the issue. The city must also find ways to create sustainable wage jobs which leads to long-term employment for the homeless, thereby eliminating the need for long-term rent subsidies. Homeless individuals with sustainable wage jobs would become self-sufficient. No need to give these people rental subsidies after a time period.